Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new series here on Deuces Cracked, which is actually a remake of an old series on Deuces Cracked. This is Andrew Beluga Whale Sideman, and with me, once again, the wonderful Kristy Arnett. Say hello, everyone.
Hey guys.
Or to everyone, I should say. Kristy and I are back for another season of Coaching Kristy. This is Coach Kristy 2, where we will pick up sort of where we left off from last time. Our last series was almost a year ago, I want to say.
Yeah.
What have you been doing since then, poker-wise?
Poker wise, I won a mini F Tops event, which we talked about before, but that was pretty exciting. And I've been playing 50 cent a dollar, although over the course of the year, I have definitely not put in enough hands. I mean, not even close. Right when we got done coaching, it was really easy to beat 25 50 cent, and I pretty quickly got to 50 cent 1, and then I got frustrated. And the things that were working obviously in 50 cent or 25 50 cent weren't working at 50 a dollar, and I was sort of surprised because I didn't expect that it was going to be much different because it's just one stake. But then I got frustrated, and I would often just quit and stop playing, and then I started playing live. And live, it's been going really well. It's just so much easier to play live. But I'm back into getting motivated and putting my head down and learning, because this is the only way I'm gonna improve quickly. So
my sort of take on it is that we've sort of, through the first Coaching Christie series and through our working together, we've sort of made it easy to beat like really bad players. Which honestly, it sounds like it should be the easiest thing of all time, but everyone when they first start playing poker has a hell of a time trying to beat, these people who just check call and limp call, and it's like and then when they raise and you have got aces, what do you do, and all these things, and I think that we've now come to the point where we're cool with that. You're killing live poker. If you move down to 25 cent, 50 cent, or 10 cent, 25 cent, you'd be just fine. It would be super easy. But we need to move on now to a point where, like, when people we're playing against are actually like thinking, where they're following some of the same rules that we've used to get to where we are now. We now need to use those rules to sort of turn things on their head and get after them. So that being said, the plan for today is to watch 4 tables of you playing 50 cent $1 on full tilt. You can tell who she is, of course, by the mini F-Tops jersey, which I will never stop bragging about. Why don't we hit play and see what's going on? Now, you said the first not a ton happens in the first part of this video, right?
right.
How has 50 cent $1 been feeling to you? Sort of give me some takes on it in a game dynamic sense. Like, what are your observations about how your games have been going?
Well, obviously I'm getting 3-bet a lot more, and before in 25 50 cent I would 3-bet for value with king queen, king jack, things like that, even out of position, because people were calling me with much worse, 8-9 suited or 9-10 or 10-8 or whatever. And people just aren't doing that as nearly as often in this level. Obviously I can't just keep betting thinly for value as much, because and also people are value betting me way lighter than before, and so I'm just getting stuck in half doing things, because I've gotten to a point where, like, I do understand things that I'm supposed to be doing, but I'll get like halfway through the thought process and half play hands, and it's kind of where I'm starting.
No, I hear you completely. I'm just trying to pause this here. We folded 9-5. I was listening to you, but we folded 9-5 suited on the button here. Two things. Number one, it looks like we might have 2 regulars on our left there. They just played a 3-bet pot a second ago. And so, like, that being said, what are 2 things you can count on for 2 regulars in the blinds?
That they're not just gonna be flatting very often.
Yeah, they're not playing a whole bunch of hands. So that's for sure true. So we actually have decent fold equity. We can get them to fold all kinds of 10x's, all kinds of Jack X's, Queen X's, King X's, maybe even Ace X's. They might fold like things like Ace 6 offsuit or stuff like that. We might expect that. And so we have good fold equity there. But the other thing we can think about for what regulars might do in the blinds is when they do decide to put money in, when they do decide to call, they don't do what passive players do that we've sort of become used to, which is they don't just check fold all the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of boards. In fact, once upon a time when I was talking about like how to play from the blinds, this is a little bit dated, but I used to say I would call with something like king queen or ace jack out of position or something like that, and I would fold on no boards. Right? I would check raise any low board, and I would like obviously smash any high board.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of people who still use that sort of general strategy because it's not terrible strategy. Like you have equity on everything, and so the way you sort of defeat somebody who's going to play pretty well, they're never going to fold, and they usually have good equity against you, is you stop c-betting them, you stop trying to collect dead money against them,
Mm-hmm.
you just recognize that you're going to be able to, that the way you're going to beat them is by taking little pieces away when they fold their blinds so often, right? So what I would recommend here we do with our 9-5 suited is min open the button. We're going to get a ton of folds. We still have fold equity, and that's just fine. And when we get called, to like not c-bet very often. And you might say like, isn't this too passive? Isn't this not being aggressive enough? But I want you to think about something. I realize I'm sort of going on a long tangent here, but I want you to think about something that gets discussed a lot in heads-up play. There was a big discussion once upon a time about whether or not it was a good idea to open 100% of buttons on the button, right? Or should you fold 7 deuce off, basically was the question. And someone did the math and said, well, if your opponent's not defending, this is actually in the recent thread 2 on 2+2, or on Deuce Cracked, well, not recent when this comes out, but recent when we're filming it. That said, if someone's opening, a heads up every hand, you need to defend like 50% or more from the big blind, otherwise you're just losing money, like it's not profitable, right? But that's only true if nothing happens post-flop, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way you lose money with deuce 7, if it's like a profitable way, like if their opponent's going to fold, let's say 60% of the time. If you open deuce 7, your opponent folds 60%, you're making money unless you just start spewing money off when you see a flop, because then you never have the best hand. You're oftentimes like bluffing badly or value owning yourself or whatever. Like the flop comes out like 7-7-3, and you get it all in and you lose to like ace 7 or king 7 or something like that. So my point is this. If people are playing generally tightly against us, we can get value from them by opening a ton of hands. However, the best way to avoid like losing money to these people, or like to continue like making money against these people, is just to play it pretty damn close to that. All right, nothing's gonna happen post flop. Like if I ever get called, I'm just out. Like unless I have the nuts, or like obviously not gonna be that tight. Like if the board comes down with this 9-5, if the board came down like 6-7 of clubs and like a 4 of hearts or something like that, so it's straight draw and a flush draw or whatever. Fire that. Sure, you be aggressive when you have a lot of equity. But the point of the matter is, it's not about tightening up necessarily. It's about maximizing the value you're trying to get. So we 3x it or we 4x it against fish because they're going to check fold a lot, just dead money. But against these guys, they're probably not going to fold a lot, and they're probably going to 3-bet a fair amount pre-flop too. So you just min open, you fold if they 3-bet, or you 4-bet, but probably you fold if they 3-bet. And I think we're talking about 4-betting regulars a little bit later on, maybe next week though. And you just sort of take it slow post-flop, and that's a pretty good strategy for what people are playing these days.
Mm-hmm.
Does all that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
I realized that was just like a 10-minute Andrew rants about something that's like you fold 9-5 suited, and it's like I'm suddenly like talking for an hour, but no. Okay, so we flat the king queen suited. Looks like we have a shorter stack, like $59 in the big blind, so it's a clear reason for us to want to flat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that was what was going through your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this guy checks on the ace jack deuce board, so it'll be interesting to see what you decide to do here. Okay, so it looks like you're going for a bet. Okay, so we bet here. Why are you betting?
I thought that a lot of times he's gonna give up with hands like pairs, small pairs.
Mm-hmm.
And also I have pot equity, obviously, because I have outs like nut outs and a lot of turnouts.
Sure.
And a lot of times I feel like when someone raises and they don't see bet, they might have hands like Jack 10 or something like that.
True. So does that mean you're going to fire multiple streets here?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And there's so many turns that will be good for me to fire on anyway.
It's true. You have backdoor spades also. So this is actually a pretty good justification. But the point that I wanted to make, though, and I think that's actually probably fine to bet here, is we're going to work on something that's new that I haven't talked about yet with anybody. It's pretty cool, right?
Awesome.
Very special. Called street projection,
Okay.
where the question is going to be, it's sort of outdated to be thinking about each street in a vacuum.
Right.
Which is a question a lot of my students have proposed to me, because it was actually quite difficult to learn how to play each street well in a vacuum. Then it's like one step or two steps more difficult to play each street well, planning on what's going to happen on the next street or on the next street or whatever. So my thought here is this: a lot of the things we're trying to get to fold here. Jack X is true, is one that may take a flop bet and then a turn bet or something like that to make it work. Against some people, it may take a river bet also, which starts to get a little dicey. But the point that I was going to try to make is a lot of these things, like the pocket fives and the pocket sevens and the, I don't know, whatever else that beats us, like stuff like that, a lot of these things will fold later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the question of, is it better now or later, and is a big one. And one of the reason why I brought up street projection is because, like, your justification was essentially a street projection justification, which is saying, yeah, like, there's most of his range that check calls the flop is check folding on a later street. So, like, I'm betting this with the intention of winning it back later. And this is something we talked about in a live hand we saw earlier today, or not earlier today, yesterday rather, where I had opened Queen 10. Got 2 calls. The board was Jack 7, 3.
Mm-hmm.
I fired out, got 2 calls because I had a backdoor flush draw or whatever, and the turn card was like another 7, and I fired out again, and I got 2 folds. And the reason why I bet so big on the flop was because I knew that, like, in a lot of circumstances when I pick up a good card on the turn, that I'm going to be able to win that money back. And that's sort of like what we're doing here, is that we should be expecting to get called quite often when we bet this king queen, right? I would expect after he checks the flop, you're getting called like more than 50% of the time.
Okay.
So in that sense, in a vacuum, this street might be bad.
Right.
But if we're going to use street projection and think, more, even if, like, say more than 50% of the time I get called now, if 80% of the time on the turn he folds, then this turn flop bet is like very, very profitable. The hand doesn't end after you get called on the flop. It's not the river.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, talking through it, I kind of like the bet, but there's a lot of times where maybe let's say we have a hand that's not as good here. Maybe let's say instead of having king queen, we have something like call it queen 10. Or let's say 10-9. Let's say 10-9 here.
Okay.
So we have 10-9 suited with of hearts, so no backdoor anything. And he checks. We should probably check the flop, because all those things that we're going to get to fold that are better, those queen highs and those pocket fours, whatever, we can get them to fold on the turn also.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's a real balance going on back and forth between, am I betting here because I've got multiple streets ahead of me, or is it better for me to wait and see what happens later?
Mm-hmm.
So this is like something that we're going to get into more detail as we go, but it is, I think, interesting, and it's sort of like, I think the next level of understanding poker is going beyond this is a good thing to do, just on the flop. This is a good thing to do just on the turn. So I think this turn bet's gonna end up being like quite successful, and it does obviously help that we have pot equity. That's never hurts our situation. But I think this is like one of those things where it's very hard for him to peel multiples here. So this is something, by the way, then to make a note of. It doesn't. I mean, I think that, like, once we get called 2 streets, I think we should give up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that our whole plan, which it looks like you think you're going to do here, our whole plan was that we thought he would fold like Jack X on the turn,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't. But once he calls, then he didn't fold. We assume he doesn't have Jack X, right? Now that we see that he calls with Jack X on the turn, we have a couple of options, right? We can either the whole two barreling thing is out, and this is one thing that we're going to talk about a lot as we go. The whole idea of 2 barreling regs kind of sucks now. The ideas of 3 barreling regs or no barreling regs are much, much, much better. And so once we see something like that, that's like worth making a note on. First of all, um, you just have to know now that if you're going to bet the flop there, you're going for 3. And honestly, against somebody who's like likely to call the turn, also maybe going for 3 is not as good as going for 0.
Right.
Um, honestly, going for 0 and being a little bit of a nit is not the worst thing in the world to do. Trust me, I nit out pretty hard sometimes. Not always.
Not always. I was watching you play live yesterday, and you're playing pretty much every minute.
Well, live's a lot easier because live,
no, of
live
course,
you can
of
make
course.
live you can make a lot of decisions based on the atmosphere at the table. Like if you just know that everyone at the table is going to play fit or fold against you because like they're afraid of losing a big pot to you and they know that you're going to be in a lot of big pots, then you can you can get the best of every world. You can bluff all the time and get people. And this is like someone whose style, like Vanessa Selbst's style, or a couple other people who I could think of, play like this, and they absolutely crush in live tournaments and live poker in general. They do very well because it's like, you can really get a good feel for like the table dynamics of how things are going in live. It's much harder to do online. And as a result, a lot of these people with these sort of like I'm going to play every hand and push you around the whole table and stuff like that who do very well live oftentimes have a much harder time online, which isn't to say that they're not great players because they are, but like the context is different. You can't get away with some of the things that you can live based off of just extra information that you get. So we float this. This is something worth talking about. Upper left table. We're in the big blind. Small blind opens. We've got Queen 9 suited. And he bets on a 6-5 deuce board, and we flat. Talk to me, Kristy. What's up?
Well, I talked to you before about trying to figure out when it's best to float and when it's best to just raise a flop, or even fold, obviously. But I thought so. Some of the things that you said about floating versus raising are that when you have more pot equity, that floating is a little bit better. But in this case, I don't think I had enough pot equity to
Sure. I mean, another way of saying this is it's like you have to ask yourself again, sort of like the c-bet with King Queen. Is it better now or later? Because essentially what you're doing here is you're running a if you decide to float, you're running a multi-street bluff. So is it better to run this multi-street bluff now, or is it better to just bluff now? Or excuse me, is it better to run the multi-street bluff now, which means you're bluffing later, or is it better to just do it now? And when I see something like Queen 9 suited here, this is not a bad spot at all to bluff. You definitely get all kinds of king highs, probably a lot of ace highs to fold. There's a lot of opportunities for you to get things like, a random 6 or like, pocket 7s or something like that to fold, or to, against certain people to, value off if you spike one of your outs or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think this is a totally fine spot to run a bluff. However, we have to ask ourselves, what are the benefits of floating this rather than raising? And I'm going to offer one more benefit for floating, but one that I'm sure was not crossing your mind at the time, and one that I think is underused and much, much, much better. And I will tell you guys about it because Deuces Cracked pays me to talk about these things. So let's explain. One other so it was sort of thought of as one downside of floating was that the likelihood of you getting barreled, right? So like for example, on this 6-5 deuce board, the 8 peels off on the turn. The danger of him taking a hand like Ace Jack that he would have folded on the flop, or Jack 10 that's worse than you, and barreling the turn, and then you're like, oh no, I have to fold, right? The sort of other thing you could think about doing would be, if you think that you're likely to get barreled a lot on the turn, would be float the flop with the intention of raising turn. This doesn't happen people don't do this nearly as often as they should. Because if you think about how tight people's ranges get on these sorts of turn raises, like think about this. If this person bets the turn here on this 6-5 deuce rainbow, 8 turn card rainbow, bets and you raise, well, it's like you're either on a pure stone bluff, which again, since most people don't do, it's like sort of like unexpected. Or you have like a nuttish type of hand, right? So if they decide they're going to bluff catch, they're never raised. They oftentimes call. And if you have some kind of equity, like it's the same sort of as it was before. So like, let's say this guy decides to bet the turn with pocket tens here and we raise. First of all, there's a totally decent chance he just folds pocket tens there. Against a 5-10 guy who might be better at reading hands, something like that, might be a little more difficult to get him to fold something like pocket tens. But think about yourself in this spot. You bet tens here and you get raised on a 6-5 deuce 8 board.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You muck that a lot. And so does every other reg at this limit at 1-2 also. You know what I mean? So this is just something to think about, like when we're talking about the rules that you play by, and that everyone else is playing by. So here's what happens: we get barreled here on the turn, and I'm assuming we either call or fold, which are like in my opinion, our two worst options here, or maybe we'll raise anyway. This would be exciting.
I don't remember.
I think you're thinking about it. You're thinking about it. And you fold.
Dang.
I like the idea though. That's a good. I mean, it's sort of cool that you thought of it.
Well, I think at the time I just thought that I wasn't sure what kind of hands you could be value betting anyway. Also because I've seen him on a lot of tables before. Because I don't have a lot of numbers on him, but I had played on my other computer with Hold'em Manager, and I just got a new computer now, so that's why I'm using Poker Tracker because I have a Mac now. But so I remember his name, and I remember he was sort of reggy-ish.
So let's think about it in this sense. When you're playing poker against micro stakes people, you bet for value, fold if they raise, right? You value bet very thinly. You go for all kinds of thin value edges because you're expecting your opponents to call a lot. Which means that you can capitalize on your equity when they call and you hit. And it also means that, like, when you have a big hand, let's deal with this in a second. When you have a big hand, then, you get value also. Because they call and they keep calling, right? So, what is, if other people are playing by the same sort of idea? Because it's become a pretty standard idea that you bet for value and you fold if they raise, right?
Yeah.
What are some ways that you could take advantage of them?
Definitely raising the turn.
Yeah, you raise spots that they are not used to hero calling against, that they don't like to hero call against. So like turn and river raises, right? And you thin value them a little bit less because they fold a little more. And what's the other part of this? I'm forgetting one part of this. Bet for value, fold if they raise. Oh yeah, just get out of the habit of calling with a lot of stuff. Because if you think about the way that poker developed, or like poker theory developed, it started off with a lot of passive people, right? And the solution to beating them was by getting really aggressive, right? Was, playing hands with equity all the time, right? Now the solution to beating them is actually, like in a certain sense, like rock, paper, scissors might work, to actually start to become more passive again in certain times with big hands, and become more aggressive with weaker hands. Because essentially what you're doing is you're going to be a passive-ish type of person, but you're going to reverse it. Like when they're expecting you to only raise big hands into flat weak hands, you're going to flat strong hands and raise weak hands. See what I'm saying? And that is, if there's any sort of like way to just flip a game totally on its head, it's doing that against some random 50-cent $1 or 1-2 regular who's sort of been ingrained. Oh my God, if I get raised on an 8-6-4-3 rainbow board and I've got pocket tens, this is a muck. If I've got pocket aces, this is a muck. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and that's a problem I'm coming up to, because when I get raised on the turn and I have like the top of my range, which is like ace queen on a queen, I don't know, 7-8 board, and like turn 6 and they're raising me. I mean, because in lower stakes, they're never raising me with like queen jack. Or unless I know that they're overvaluing or bad aggressive. So then I feel, though, that I'm still folding too often, though, now.
I mean, most likely you're not. I'll just say right now, most likely, most players don't raise enough as a bluff, and especially not on later streets. Like, it's still kind of sick. Like, people are kind of getting good at poker, and yet no one ever raises the river as a bluff until you get to 5-10.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't happen. Everyone's all afraid that they're going to run to the nuts, and they don't care that their opponent's going to fold to everything but the nuts, and they just won't do it. Um, and so I would not get the solution to these things. And this is the thing, is why it's such a trap. It feels like the solution to these things is to start calling more.
Yeah.
You know, like, these guys are being really, really aggro, and like, I'm gonna start calling more, and blah, blah, blah. And that's actually okay to call more with some really big things. Like, for example, instead of having ace queen there, like, let's say if you had pocket queens, right?
Mm-hmm.
That might be a spot where everyone would say, oh, well, if you bet the flop and get raised on the turn, like, auto ship. But if you call there, if your opponent was value betting, they're going to thin value you on the river, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If they're bluffing, you give them a chance to bluff, right? So calling with really strong things is good. This is sort of what I was saying. We want to reverse it a little bit. We want to get out of the habit of calling with the things that are a little weaker that we feel scared about, and start raising those or folding them, and start the things that we call with are the things that are just really, really, really strong.
Yeah.
Which is sort of, I mean, I introduced a little bit ago this idea of flatting 4 bets out of position or calling 3 bets out of position, and I started off by saying just do it with really strong stuff. Aces, kings, ace king, stuff like that. Because not only will people not put you on it, which, I mean, they're trying to read hands, but they're only doing an okay job of it, but it sort of breaks their mold. They want to value bet really bad, and they want to fold if you show that you have a hand.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like if somebody 4-bets me with ace 7, and I call with ace king, and the board comes down ace high, and I check. What are they going to do? They're going to bet.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, I have top pair in a 4-bet pot, so I probably get some value here somewhere. Like, bet.
Yeah, I definitely remember watching the video, and I did it a couple times, but then I would do it, and then I'd be like, okay, I have ace king, and the flop's 8, 7, 4. Now what do I do? Not
Check.
fold?
Not fold.
Not fold.
Not fold.
Okay.
If they're going to 3-out you, like, they're going to 3-out you, and that's going to be really tough.
Okay.
But, like, their 3-outs is not very many outs. And most of the time there, you know, the board is 8, 7, 4. If, let's say that they're 4-betting you with ace X, right? So they could definitely have ace 8, ace 7, and ace 4. Oh, no. But they could also have ace 5 and ace 6 and ace 9, which are all probably, like, well, statistically are more likely than the other ones because there's just, you know, those cards aren't out there. Then you say, if you're going to throw in a bunch of other random things and then take into account that you probably have, even if they do pair, that you still have, you know, if they have, let's say, like Jack 4 and the pair 4, you still have 6 outs, and you oftentimes still have 3 outs or whatever, and that you get a ton of implied odds on your outs because they all freak out whenever an ace turns or something like that. Yeah, it is a situation where you will lose sometimes when something silly happens, right? It's like, is it a bad idea to slow play quad queens if your opponent runs down a straight flush?
No.
It's not a bad idea to slow play quad queens, you know, if your opponent's going to be firing with their, you know, turn flush draw, right?
Yeah.
So, you don't say, shit, you know, I got owned this time, so, like, clearly I should fast play my quad queens every time. What you say is, you know what, I understand that playing it this way offers my opponent a chance to capitalize on equity. However, since my opponent doesn't have very much equity, I'm cool taking this type of situation. Which is why we don't slow play, we don't flat these 4-bets out of position with Queen Jack.
Yeah.
Because, like, if our opponent has ace X or king X or whatever, like, they have a ton of equity. They're winning. Like, we can't slow play something when the other person is very likely to win. We can only slow play things when our opponent is very likely to lose. And people oftentimes get in the habit of overestimating how often they lose with ace king when they miss the flop. You know, if you're like, deal out 2 random cards, play ace king against them on a random flop. You know, most of the time when you don't hit an ace or a king, when you hit an ace or king, you win like every time. It's like a lock. When you don't hit an ace or a king, like, you still win like every time. It's still like a lock. You know, they have the ace 7 and the board comes down jack 9 3, you win. Or 10 4 1 or 1. 10 4 deuce. So, you know, it's like, so, you know, same old. Anyway, we're on to this hand now. So he opens to $3, the cutoff does, and you're on the button with ace jack, and you decide to 3-bet. Tell me why.
Well, actually, with all the things that I said earlier about him being like a reg, I probably shouldn't be 3-betting ace jack. I should probably just be flatting. But
there's a couple reasons that it may not be true, but keep going.
Okay. Also, even though I remembered that he was sort of a player that I've seen a lot, I just kind of wanted to see. I mean, we talked about it last in Coaching Kristy 1 about sometimes just finding out how they're going to react to three bets early, and
No,
see,
this is true. I mean, I think ideally we'd rather do this with a hand that's not ace jack, which
not
is
as
kind of one
good.
of those things that like will probably fold to a four bet, I
Yeah.
guess. But like we don't like that. Maybe
Yeah.
we would shove, but we don't like that either. Like the whole thing just doesn't seem like it really fits the hand quite
So
well.
like a 10-8 suited or something.
Yeah, sure. And
Okay.
actually, that's what I'm talking about here. It's sort of the reason why like ace jack might be a three bet here, sort of the same way why 10-8 suited might be a three bet here, where in other situations they'd both be calls. Um, is because the two guys on the left look like they're both kind of reggy guys. So we talked about that before. They played a three bet pot where one guy c bet the flop, the other guy raised, and the first guy folded, and they're sort of
Mhm.
seeming like they're doing aggro reggy things. So it actually is not a terrible thing to keep them out of the pot. It's
Stop
not,
them
it's not
from
a terrible
squeezing.
thing to. Well, yeah, Ace Jack does okay against the squeeze, so it's
Uh-huh.
like a little bit okay there. But even then, our opponents oftentimes squeeze depolarized ranges, and a depolarized range Ace Jack like does so. You beat Ace 10 and King Jack, you lose to Ace Queen and Ace King and King Jack, or no, not King Jack, and and pocket queens and stuff like that. But you know what I'm saying. So actually, there are some real benefits to three betting this, particularly if you think there's enough dynamic that the person will either call you out of position with a weak hand, which a lot of players still will at these limits, or if you think they're likely to four bet. If you think someone's likely to four bet, there is nothing wrong with three bet five betting Ace Jack. That's cool. So a lot of these like really aggro things, you might look at a hand like this and say, okay, what kind of value do I get if I flat? Well, the blinds are not really anything that I'm getting a lot of value from here if I flat.
Mhm.
So what kind of value do I get if I raise? Well, you get obviously the fold equity of your opponent folding some of his pot equity or whatever. But you also potentially get your opponent to satisfy the value reason for betting, which is to either get called or raised by a worse hand. So one thing then to think about might be this. Let's say your opponent we'll take it one step further. Opponent's likely to four bet you, as is sort of common in these things. You three bet. You think your opponent has a polarized range of things like Ace X and King X and Jack X and stuff. So he four bets you. So you might think about calling the four bet, right? Same thing as before. This is totally not cool if your opponent's four betting you with things like, um, you know, depolarized stuff. Let's say, if there was like a whole bunch of ace queen and pocket tens and stuff like that in his range, that's less good. Even then, like it's not that bad. Um, However, if your opponent's four betting range includes a lot of the stuff that people expect it to include, like a lot of random blockers and things like that, then it's actually kind of cool to three bet and flat the four bet in position, and just use the fact that people don't play very well post flop. you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
obviously if you hit, you're not folding, but like if the board comes down, king queen three, or sometimes the board will come down like you know 10 8 6, and the person will like check, and then you have a lot of options there. You can either try to bluff them off of like ace king ace queen, which will work sometimes, or you can there's a lot of things you can do. So
Mhm.
just some thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's see how this hand plays out.
The other thing I feel like I need to work on
Hmm.
is three betting, or when I get three bet ranges that I can flat with, because in
Hmm.
in smaller stakes I was just folding a lot because it didn't
Sure.
happen very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
But now that it's happening so often and people are doing it so lightly, I need to like definitely open up my range that I can flat with.
Sure. So, well, the flat, whether or not you want to flat or not, depends really heavily on what types of things your opponents are raising with,
Mhm.
which is something that you need to pay a lot of attention to when it comes to showdown.
Okay. Yeah.
So, like for example, there's certain opponents that I still fold like all day to.
Mhm.
They may have three bet percentages of, I don't know, 10% or something like that. But the 10% that they're doing is all stuff that has like somewhat significant equity. They're three betting like all the ace tens. They're three betting all the king tens. You know what I mean? And against somebody like that, widening your flatting range is a dangerous thing to do, because their whole idea of why they're doing that, like before, they're like value betting,
Mhm.
and value betting only works if the other person calls, right? Um, or raises, but then we'll talk about that in a second. But when you see somebody three bet and then they get the showdown, and it might not even be against you. Like this, I'm going to pay attention to when somebody's three betting somebody else, and they show up with like 10-9 suited or whatever that we've got there. Well, now against that person, widening your calling range is pretty much awesome, because you're going to start dominating a lot of their things. You're going to just be in a great spot equity-wise that you wouldn't be otherwise. So this really, really, really depends on who you're up against. So like that guy who's 3-betting all the king 10s and all the ace 10s or whatever, I'm not widening my flatting range against him.
Okay.
I'm either 4-betting him or I'm folding, and I'm probably keeping roughly the same flatting range that I would normally, which is like a pretty damn tight flatting range, right? You try to like figure out whether or not your opponent's polarized or depolarized. Try to figure out what your opponent is basically thinking. Before we actually, I want to run that hand back in this. I want to run this back just a second here. So we opened this flop with 10-9 suited here. Let's actually go just a little bit further back. Oh shoot, that's too far. Awesome video, right, guys?
Here.
You got it. This is your computer.
I have delicate finger hands.
Yeah, I know.
Finger hands.
That's awesome. Okay, cool.
Woman hands.
Yeah, I do not have woman hands. So we open 9-10 suited. This looks fine. We should be able to play it pretty well post flop. We flop top pair. Good spots to value bet, also to clean up a fair amount of equity. There's a lot of things like Jack 10 and Queen Jack and King Jack and Ace 10 and stuff like that could potentially draw out on us or could make us fold in other ways. When we bet and get 2 calls, this is like pretty standard fold. So I think this pen's played fine. And then over on the left, there's a min raise, and we have Ace 10 off, and I think we're gonna 3-bet it here. Again, this is good. This is what we talked about before about like, we feel good about this element of attacking the regulars. You know what I mean? We feel good about the fish. We feel good about just value betting the hell out of like some half stack who min opens and we have Ace 10. Like, we're fine with this. We bet the flop. He folds like pocket 4s or he folds like King 10 or something like that, and we just like move about our business, and that's fine. So 4-5 suited here. So here's nothing to think about here. This might be a type of hand that would be a bet. Oh, actually, interesting. This is kind of an interesting spot. I'm gonna pause the tape really fast. So I was gonna say, against sort of a normal reg, we actually might then ask ourselves: is the value that I get by flatting 4-5 suited here superior to the value that I would get by just 3-betting it? Right? And I think that in a blind versus blind spot, it's actually probably unlikely. You probably get better value just by 3-betting him. It's because you need someone to fold post flop a lot to make 4-5 suited work. And they might not in the blind versus blind spot. And you still like have pretty good fold equity in the blind versus blind 3-betting spot, especially like nowadays. Like the game dynamic is as such that it's people are really like nervous about 4-betting into big blind 3-betters, like small blind versus big. So I think that it's like a little bit better in general to 3-bet that hand. However, what did we just see a second ago? We opened, small blind called, and he overcalled with Ace 8 off. Right? Then he overcalled the flop with a gutter, no redraws, no like diamonds or anything. Turn card was a diamond, and he donked, into 2 people who are obviously both very plausibly could have flushes or could have sets or overpairs or whatever, right? So this guy right off the bat we can sort of just assume is bad, and against somebody bad we might say do I get better value from flatting this than raising it? You would say for sure. So actually, you're playing well so far.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. But okay, so what you were talking about before is flatting 3-bet ranges, and so what about with hands like pairs? And so if a guy's 3-betting a depolarized range like King 10, King Queen, Ace 10, things like that, then what do I do with pairs?
Well, first of all, the question would be, does he fold a lot of those things to a 4-bet?
Right.
So against a lot of these people, you can just 4-bet, and you'll probably have to call it off because it's just more likely that they have like, Ace King or Ace Queen than it is that they have big pairs, and so it's just like this is going to be a high variance. You're going to get stacked a fair amount of the time, type of thing. But if you let's say are up against somebody with a depolarized range. Now, if you are deep, you can these are like the perfect people to flat against, because they're the type of people who will flop like big top pairs, or have over pairs, or big top pair top kicker type things, right? That's who you want to flop sets against. I think did we float this flop again with Queen 10 over here? How did this happen?
Oh, I wasn't watching.
Me neither. would like to just quickly see the flop. Oh, we 3-bet it pre-flop.
I think I 3-bet C-bet. I think. Or maybe I just gave up.
Let's see.
I'm pretty sure I just gave up.
Let's see if the flop was a good one to give up on. I just kind of awkwardly saw us checking or raising or something going on in the we'll talk about the defending range in a second though with like pairs and stuff. Oh, because we're talking about like oh, this seems like a good spot to c-bet.
Okay.
If let me rephrase this. If you're gonna 3-bet Queen 10 suited, this seems like a good spot to c-bet.
Okay.
Because you're 3-betting King 10 suited. Let's pause this here. If you're 3-betting Queen 10 suited pre-flop, it is because you expect your opponent to call with many worse things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like Jack 10 and whatever, and Ace 5 and stuff like that, right? And then to fold when they miss, right?
Yeah.
You can get value when you both hit, or when you hit, or when they have something small or whatever. But most of the time, you expect them to just fold, right? Post flop. So, like, against somebody that you're going to 3-bet, Queen 10 suited against, you got to fire pretty much every flop.
Yeah.
Whether you miss or you hit, like, you're pretty much firing every flop.
Yeah.
If you're 3-betting, if you're playing against somebody that you want to give up on an 8-6 deuce flop against,
You shouldn't be 3-betting with
shouldn't be
Queen 10.
3-betting Queen 10
Yeah,
suited
yeah.
because, like, the hands they're calling with are too good.
Yeah.
So, like, if you 3-bet me with Queen 10 suited and I call you, most likely you should give up. Because like I'm probably on this sort of board because I'm not going anywhere. Like I have probably a better hand than you. I know that. And on this board didn't change very much, so I still probably have a better hand than you. So you're not going to give me fold very much. However, against me, if you call with Queen 10 suited, I've got like the 9-4 suited of the same suit. Like then you're going to get some good value. But no, it's sort of one of those things where it's like there's a disjointment here. Disjointment's definitely not a word. I'm rolling with it. It's disjointed, like whether or not like each action doesn't go with the next. It should either be a raise and a c-bet, or it should be just a flat and then play poker.
Right.
Okay, getting back to what we're saying about defending with pairs and stuff. If in the event that your opponent has a depolarized range, and you are deep, or deep enough, flatting with pairs is awesome. It's not a big deal to call and fold if you miss, because you're aware that because they are playing hands that have like, so often they're going to stack off with those hands, that like your implied odds actually are fantastic. If you're playing against somebody who has a polarized range, then we have real problems flatting with small pairs. Things like pocket fours or whatever. The reason for that is our opponents are likely to play very aggressively with things they don't want to stack off with, which is sort of troubling for us. And by the same token, when we make big hands, their big hands that they do like to stack off with are usually better. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if somebody 3-bets with 7-8 suited and we call with pocket sixes, and the board comes down, 9-6-5. That's the kind of thing that happens when you're up against someone with depolarized range. Is you're trying to make a big hand, but they're trying to make a bigger hand.
Mm-hmm.
So we just set this guy in. That seems totally fine here. One time, I'm rooting for you. No love. But no. So the real question to be aware of is, what am I playing against? That's like that has to be the number one thing you think about all the time. Which is why like when two good players play heads up, it's quite fascinating because they're both oscillating between polarization and depolarization, and they're trying to time up whether or not they're it's now is the time to be polarized or depolarized. What you'll find is that most regs at this limit, I would assume, are depolarized. They have good things in their range, which is why when you 4-bet them, oftentimes they shove, because they have good things in their range, and that's like really they're at their strongest. The reason for that is because they're so used to playing against fish, they've never adapted to playing against regs. When they play against fish, that's all they do. They pick up their king jack, the fish opens, and they're like, hooray, value, and they 3-bet, and that's good, that works. But it doesn't work against you. It shouldn't work against you.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody is 3-betting you with those types of things, if you ever see a king jack or a king 10 at showdown or something like that, or if you ever see on the other hand like a 7-6 suited, you just either make a mental note or you write it down or whatever, because that's going to inform the whole way you're going to play against that person. How did this Jack's hand develop
He raised
here?
under the gun. I flatted. The small blind and big blind called. He c-bet. I raised. He shipped.
Okay, so if we're gonna raise, we have to call the ship.
Yeah.
The raise is a little bit questionable though, just because he's c-betting into multiple people, and it's like, he's definitely value betting. Put it that way. However, I think that we beat enough of his value combos there, like to be fine raising and getting it in. Basically, what I'm saying is, for value combos, you can have 3 sets, which are hard to make, and you can have queens, kings, and aces. For like straight value. He can also have 10s, 9s, and a whole variation of 8s. You know what I mean? Which we can get value from. And like he can obviously clearly have many flush draws as well in his range that he would not fold or get in with or whatever. So in that sense, like if you have queens, if you still play queens there, no brainer. Kings, aces, no brainer. Raise, you get it in, no problem. But if you have 10s there, it's probably a flat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you have jacks there, you're hanging out like right on the border, and it's actually kind of amusing that the 2 hands that showed up were jacks and 10s, because you can see how close it is. Like,
yeah,
that's like, if you have 10s there, I don't think you can really comfortably raise and get it in. You know what I mean? So this is a table dynamics thing. Just be aware of how many people are in a pot. I think I showed you I was playing a live hand the other day where like I had like. So under the gun raised, I called with king jack suited. 4 other people called, like 6 way to the flop. Flop was king, queen, 7, all clubs. Pre-flop raiser bets. It's just like a fold. You know what I mean? It's like he's not betting very many things that are worse than a king there, or worse than king jack there. And it's like all of his value things absolutely have us crushed. So, just be aware of table dynamics. Your hand was sort of just right there on the border that, like, it just makes me nervous. Again, we're floating with king high here. I'm kind of confused about it. Oh, we're check calling with king high out of position. This is actually a little bit better than I thought. I'm assuming this guy's some kind of aggressive regular.
Yeah, I have a note on him, I think, that I just,
So this is actually kind of cool.
that I didn't know what to do. It's
Well-
because like I get like these, I halfway do hands. You know what I mean? Because like I think I know what I'm doing, and then I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, like because
This is really close between betting and check calling. On this river here. So the action was he raised, we called in the big blind.
yeah,
Flop was jack 6-6 rainbow. We check, he bet, we call. Turn card's a 9. We check, he bets like less than almost like a third pot or something like that. And we check raise. I think our check raise could have been a little bigger. We check raise, and he calls. So like a lot of his things there for bet calling, that's for doing that small. Are just almost always going to be draws, because like his bet would seem to be like a thin value bet type of size, but it's sort of hard for him to be thin value betting here unless he has some like random Jack X type of thing. Actually, that starts to make more sense now. Jack X seems to make more sense here for that turn bet than like a flush draw actually.
I was thinking. So when he raises on a button and I flat, like his range is obviously super wide, and like Jack 6-6.
Here's a question: do you think he folds ace high to a check raise on the flop?
Yeah.
If he folds ace high, because if we're going to be running a bluff here, which is what we're doing,
Yeah.
the whole idea would be to try to get ace high to fold, which is a totally legit thing because he has a million ace highs in his range.
Yeah.
If you think that he folds ace high to a check raise, you should probably just check raise
Just
the
do it on
flop.
the flop. Yeah.
If you think that he doesn't, then this is like another good way to
Play
play the hand. I'm cool with this. Like, I'm cool with this in general. You might even be able to check call the turn.
Because he probably calls with hands that he turned up some sort of.
Well, if
equity
he
or
turns a
something.
draw, we're usually ahead. But I'm more concerned with him like when he bets this small, with him having like Jack X and giving us really good odds to hit 7 outs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't even. It's weird because when I watch these hands, I don't really remember what happens. I don't remember.
Me neither. It's an exciting mystery. So we fire huge on the river.
Plus 36.
Plus 36, we bet 21. We're not betting so huge. You know what? I like it. Although maybe I like a check call more, but I think I like it.
A check. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to what I was saying before at the beginning, which is like if somebody's thin value betting you, or if what their bet size represents basically that they are not strong. Like when he bets 4 into 11 there or something like that. And we'll tape run. And then and we like put in a raise something and he calls. There's in one of my ghost videos recently, I had a similar sort of hand where somebody bet the turn and I raised and he called out of position. That's like very, very much almost always a draw. So like even though I had nothing, when he checked the river, like I know that I can get him off of a draw because like that's what he has, very, very simply. And so like when he calls your check raise on the turn there, he has a draw almost always, which is why like it's very close between a check call and try to get him like with queen 10 or with like 10-8 or some random flush draw or something like that to fire. Or to just bet yourself. Now, the fact that he can have ace high a fair amount of time, like not flush draws that missed and stuff, if he's c-betting those things, which again would be another thing to pay attention to sort of narrow his range, means that I think that it's probably maybe betting is a little bit better. But no. But I want to tie this into what we were saying before though.
I flatted.
We're gonna talk about that in a second too. Notice what happened there. You have a guy who is all aggro, but then as soon as you start putting some aggression back onto him, post-flop, pre-flop is different. People understand pre-flop aggression.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start putting some aggression onto him post-flop, what does he do? He clams up and becomes just the same old passive guy that everyone else is. He's like, oh my god, she's raising a jack 6-6 board. I have outs. I'll call. Maybe I'll get lucky. Oh, I didn't call. She bet again. Oh no. Okay, I fold. Like, that's the sort of thing that people will do, all over the place at these limits.
Yeah.
The same thing with the, queen 9 on the 8-6-5 or 6-4-6-5-3-8 board. He bets. He's like, all right, I got 10s. I'm betting for value because I'm totally ahead. Because she's calling. Oh my god, she raised. Oh no. Head in hands, like, oh my god, I'm gonna get stacked if I do this.
You know what's bad is that I'm that person.
But here's the thing: it's everybody does this though. Okay. Everybody at these limits who's not used to dealing with post-flop aggression does this.
Yeah.
And so the way that we can beat these limits is by, getting to that next level, and we'll still kind of like it will still suck for us when we have 10s and we get raised on an 6-5 board or whatever, right? But it only sucks for us because the reason why it sucks is because we know we're probably beat.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the good thing for us is that we are probably beat against most people here.
Right.
2-4, 2-4, 5-10. You kind of have to be like, well, I may well be beat, but here we go. But at these limits, like, because everyone feels like you do, they'll fold. They don't want to be involved in these things. You can have a great advantage by just, taking advantage of that. Do that. Like, in these spots where people are like, oh, like, which is kind of what you did with the King 10 there, which is kind of like a good creative play. You say, all right, I'm on the turn or the river, the flop. Again, the farther along the hand you get, the more likely people are to play badly and to get kind of afraid and to do these things, right? So, like, rather than doing a lot of flop c-betting and giving up at these limits against these regulars, that's not very good anymore. But firing, many barrels is really good because people are like, oh my god, she's getting aggro, she has a hand, right? The same way that you are when someone does that to you.
Yeah.
They're still in I'm playing against passive players mode, right? Like, they have not yet graduated to I'm playing as aggressive players mode. We are trying now to teach I'm in aggressive players mode. Let's talk quickly about this hand down here with the 4s. This is a matter of some debate, but I believe the 4s should be a 3-bet.
Yeah. Unless
the big blind is a big fish or the pre-flop raiser is a big fish. If he's just a normal aggro dude, there's a couple reasons why. Number one, well, this is another good reason, but this wasn't number one. Number 3, you could get squeezed by someone else and you might have to fold.
Yeah.
But number one, what I was going to say, is that you get him to fold all kinds of 50%, which, because you're out of position, is good for you. Okay. Number two, the range of things that you get called by, again, also not bad for you. Like a lot of big cards and things that you're flipping with, and things that you'll be able to read generally pretty well. Right? So, like, if the board comes down King, Queen, 9, you don't c-bet.
Yeah.
If the board comes down 5, 3, 3, you bet for value. Because you're going to get floated by ace high all the time. You know what I'm saying? So we can read these things like pretty well. They don't. Everyone who says that small pairs don't play well post flop, that's stupid. They play great post flop. They're like, you either have the best hand or you don't, and it's very quickly and easy to see whether or not you do. And obviously, if you flop a set, that's a huge reason of it. Another sort of reason why it's good to 3-bet is a lot of these aggro people, they take their default play back line with air as 4-betting. So if they're not 4-betting pocket tens, which they're probably not because they're probably calling, right? Then their 4-betting range is only jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace king, probably call with ace queen, right? Maybe they call with ace king. Right, so like they're 4-betting, they probably 4-bet ace king. So their 4-betting range is like basically really narrow for value, and if they ever do play back, it's just all random bluffs. So you actually get a ton of dead money with this whole idea of, can I raise and get them to raise me with the worst hand? And that's sort of the idea is we raise, have them raise you the worst hand, and then we can ship. This also helps us when they fold a lot. It helps us when we decide to flat these 4-bets with things like ace king or aces and kings, because they've seen us shoving over the top of their 4-bets, so they know that, in their mind they're like, oh, okay, so they definitely are shoving, aces, ace king, king, stuff like that. So then they hand read even worse against us once we decide to flat one of those things. I realize that's pretty advanced, like we're getting pretty intense there. Moral of the story is, against a reg with no good reason to flat, 3-betting your pairs is probably better than flatting.
Okay.
And then this ace-9 hand, I think the flop go check somehow?
I thought I called a c-bet.
Okay, that makes sense, actually. I think we called the c-bet.
Yeah. And then he checked the turn.
So we're trying to get him to fold ace-high here, I'm assuming?
Yeah. But...
He makes it really small. Despite the paired board, I think the odds are good enough. But the paired board is obviously super whack. But no, I think that we're cool with this sort of thing. But see, this is one of those things where, again, right now we're playing against somebody who, this guy's actually kind of a fishy dude. But we're like in, playing against passive players mode, and we're fine. It's like, oh, I have a huge draw. He's betting. I hope I hit. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, when we're dealing with aggressive players, it's going to start being more like, I wonder what I can get him to fold. Yes, because this is one of those questions that we never ask ourselves against fish. Yeah. We never say, like, I wonder what I can get this fish to fold. Because, as I just found out from the live session I played earlier tonight where I bluffed off, like, 120 big blinds and got called by Jack 4 off for bottom pair on a King 7 4 9 10 board. The moral of the story is you don't ask yourself against fish. Oh, what can I get him to fold here? Because if he's not folding, he's not folding. No matter what he has. However, against regulars, we can start asking ourselves, what can I get him to? What really can I get him to fold here? Can I get him to fold an ace here if I 3-barrel? Can I get him to fold, pocket tens if I raise this 8-6-3 board? Because then you find is that a lot of these situations, people will fold down to the very nuts. That they'll fold like all the way down. And if you think about how wide a lot of these people's ranges are for their floats, for their calls, for their draws, for whatever, the nuts is very hard to make. And so I'll sort of like, I think we're almost out of time actually, but like I'll leave with sort of, I'll talk about one quick hand that I played in France as part of the like Deauville tournament or whatever. Oh, we flip a set. We'll watch this too. Where a Swedish guy, I had ace queen, the Swedish guy raised, I called on the button, and the flop was ace king 9, and he bet and I called. Turn card was a 10, he bet again and I called. River card was a jack, giving me the nuts, and he shipped me all in and I called, and he was pure bluffing. Okay?
Yeah.
Which is like kind of awesome because it's like totally classic Swedish type situation.
Yeah.
But then he's like, I was not happy on the turn. On the ace king 9 10 board, I've got ace queen and he's firing again big on me. Like, yikes! There's a lot of things that I'm losing to. Did you lose that pot somehow?
Yeah.
Oh, he ran down the straight or something?
Yeah, he flopped a flush draw.
Yeah.
And turned a...
Turned a straight draw and then ran it down straight. That's cool. That guy's just a fish. We know how to deal with him. But what I was going to say about that hand, though, is that, against somebody who's thinking about hands and who's trying to, not pay off. When you apply a lot of pressure like that, when you really commit to your aggression, a lot, rather than just, if that Swedish guy barrels like 1 street, 2 streets, and then gives up, it's the easiest hand ever for me to play. I've seen that a million times, no problem. However, if he goes 1, 2, 3 the whole way, if I don't straighten out there on the river, which he was going to fire anyway, so if the board came down ace, king, 9, 10, 7, and he ships on the river, and I've got ace, queen. I don't know, there's a good chance I fold. Maybe I don't fold because he's Swedish, but if it was an American woman, you better believe that I would be mocking my hand in a heartbeat. Simply because, at that point, I'm folding down to the nuts. I'm folding down to the effective nuts. And when you see someone in that mode of I'm not going to pay off, I'm going to value bet, but I'm going to fold if they raise type of thing. That's your cue to commit to the aggression and ramp up the aggression and do that whole thing. We have queens. This is going to be our last hand for today.
Okay.
The other thing that's sort of tied to this is something called managing our nuts versus air ratio, which I'm actually going to start calling the NAR, the nuts versus air ratio. All right, just because I got tired of saying nuts versus air ratio. All right, aggro dude, min re-raises, and we ship. Why'd you ship? Without noting that he flopped the set, obviously.
Well, since I 3-bet, I thought that, tens and jacks were part of his range, and I thought that I didn't want, a scare card to come, or one that maybe he'd be able to fold on the turn. So, and the pot was already so big because it was a 3-bet and a bet and a raise, so I just thought it would be better to get it in there. But I guess, I'm having a hard time knowing, if I can ever fold.
No, you can't fold there. The only question there is whether or not it's against this guy you can't fold there. Against maybe somebody else, maybe you could, but there's very few people that you can fold here. The question is whether or not it's better to call or to raise. And actually, I think this hand's played fine. But the reason I want to draw attention to it is because, again, it's one of those things where it's if we have pocket 9s here, raising is a mistake. If we have pocket queens here, raising is not a mistake. And that's sort of the way that playing against these types of depolarized ranges work. Where, or I'm going to say polarized ranges, I suppose. Where if he's got, a nuttish thing here on the flop, he's going with it regardless. Right? And so even if we flat with our queens and, whatever the turn card comes, he's going to bet whatever. If he's got a bluff here, if we have queens, he probably has a lot of equity. A lot of kings, a lot of aces, a lot of straight draws, a lot of stuff like that, right? However, if we have a set, he's got no equity. So we always flat there with the set. We always raise with the queens. I think the hand's played fine. Nothing you can do about someone, flopping sets and 3-bet pots. It's just going to suck for you.
Yeah.
But no worries.
Okay.
Thankfully, I talked forever this time, and so we only got 20 minutes through of this actual video. So we'll probably come back and do this video again next time, and we'll continue where we left off. Any questions or things to add, or?
No, it's good to get back into it.
I know. I feel like I talked a ton this time. I feel
it's
a ton of
good.
Stuff about you.
It's good.
Cool. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed watching. This has been episode 1 of Coaching Kristy Dos, which is the Spanish translation of Coaching Kristy 2.
You know, I don't speak Spanish.
Well, technically the Spanish translation would be Entrenando Kristy Dos. But we'll just say Coaching Kristy 2. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Andrew Beluga, Will Simon, and Kristy Arnett, only on deucescrack.com. See you guys next week.
Bye.